Hey, welcome to Caspio Live. This is Ned. Welcome to yet another episode of Building Applications with Caspio's no-code, low-code platform. Let me know that you can hear me okay, and we can begin with today's presentation in where we build a finance application. It's basically a SaaS application for anybody to be able to register, log in. Let me flip my tab here. So anyone is going to be able to sign up using a very simple registration form. And then upon signing up, you're going to be able to sign in and be able to see various different KPIs, metrics on all of your personal finances. Obviously, there are many applications, especially for your iPhone, that you can download today from the App Store. But this is web-based. I just wanted to showcase Caspio's Flex framework and how you can develop something like that, where on your dashboard, you're able to see all of this month's expenses if you wish to track all of your expenditures and know exactly where your money is going. We have expenses by category, a simple pie chart that gives us a distribution. Then we can flip over to see all of the expenses. We have the ability to add a new expense. We can edit existing expenses. Then we have expenses by month and also broken down by category. We have the ability to filter. And then a separate place where we can manage all of the recurring expenses. These are more set it and forget it type, meaning that you just input it once and then every month it's going to recur, and then you're going to be able to not have to input those manually every single time. So it's a nice way to just keep track of all of the ones that are recurring in a separate place. It gives you an idea how much you're spending maybe for your car payment, electricity, internet, all of your streaming services. And then what's going to happen is every single month on that specific day, depending on when you add this recurring expense, it will be added to all of your expenses. So it gets transferred over here and it groups in with all of the ones that you will manually add as well. So for example, if you went out to a restaurant to eat on a single night, you can add that manual expenses and that manual expense, and it'll be grouped with all of the recurring expenses as well. And then finally, under reports, we're going to be able to see maybe a pivot table that shows all of your expenses grouped by category, perhaps. Now, it did occur to me as I was building this application yesterday that in Flex, there's a small limitation. We can't do totals and aggregations like we can inside the Bridge framework. So with that in mind, just note that we won't be able to see any grand totals in all of our reports, unfortunately, because there's no ability to do totals and aggregations. But we can still get around it a little bit by grouping maybe in a pivot table. I'm going to test something later on to see if I can group by month and month here at the top to see the grand total for that specific month. We'll play around with it a little bit later today. But this is the application we're going to develop. So with that said, let's go inside Caspio to review all of our tables like we normally do. We don't build the tables just because that takes too long and it's a tedious process to always input fields and data types, but I will walk you through every single table for this application, starting with the main expenses table. And in this table, you have your primary key, expense ID. We also have the user ID because obviously we need to track which member is adding their expenses into our expenses table. We have the name of the expense, category that it belongs to, how much money we spent, and date submitted. Thanks, King Capo. Yeah, I wasn't feeling well 2 days ago. Not to get into too much information, but I'm still recovering, but I was touch and go there yesterday to see if I will be able to make today's live stream. So if I'm not at my best, my optimal, then just note that I was sick yesterday and the day before. So, but we are making hopefully a quick recovery here. All right, so that's the expenses table. We have our recurring expenses table as well, where we keep this information in a separate table. Okay, these are, like I said, set it and forget it types. We have, again, the expense ID. We have user ID, name, category, cost, and then we have a checkbox for recurring, which is the main difference here between this table and the one that we just looked at with the addition of this field. What we're going to do is use the task. We're going to build this task later to automatically, if the item is flagged as recurring in this table, to take that information and put it inside the expenses table. Okay, so this table will only contain the recurring expenses. I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 items. But every single month, as long as that item is recurring, it's flagged, it's checked, the task is going to take that data. I don't have any sample data inside this table just yet. We'll add that later. But it's going to take all of these items, as long as they're flagged as recurring, and move them inside the expenses table. Okay, because they should also be inside the expenses table so that we can track those items plus the ones that we add manually. Like, for example, if you went to a restaurant to eat, or maybe you went to Lowe's, or I don't know, Home Depot, you bought something, but you also want to be able to track how much money in total you spent for a month. Okay, so all of those need to be together, grouped together. And we have a simple categories lookup table, right? Okay, that should be self-explanatory. And then finally, we have our directory, which is our user table. And I only listed myself as an example, but if you had other members who sign up on your website, they will be listed inside this table. They'll also be able to log in and be able to track their own expenses. This is a fun little SaaS application, software as a service application, where the incentive is, and I know myself, I really should be using something like this, and I don't, just because some months we tend to exceed our monthly budget. But the idea is simple. You know, you sign up, you log in, you track all of your expenses, and you know if you're staying within budget or not. You know, so that's a very helpful thing for people who need to manage their money a little bit better, I guess. All right, simple application. We have 4 tables. Let's move down to roles, and let's set this up together. So we have a public role, which is going to house that public registration form. Okay, so let's go ahead and edit or open. Go to our permissions, and then simply just flip this from no to yes under create, because anybody who comes to that page should be able to create an account because it's an open registration form. It's public facing. Okay, we'll save. And that's the only thing that's going to be public facing. It's just that registration form. Okay. Let's go back out to roles and let's set up our second role for members. And the directory that I created, which now I forgot to name, I believe it's Flex. My finances, Caspio Live, this one. And we'll hit create. And now let's set up our permissions. Okay, so for our permissions, I'm just going to change all of these to yes, all records, all records, all records. And then we're going to add custom permissions. So these are the global permissions across all of your tables that you have in your account. That's what I'm doing here, okay? However, you can make custom permissions on a single individual table if you needed to override or supersede these global permissions. So you add a custom permission. We're going to add one on our expenses table and our recurring expenses. So we'll include these 2 tables. And then simply just, we're going to set this to yes for both of these because we want them to be able to create an expense or add an expense and also be able to add a recurring expense when they log in. Anyone should be able to do that within the application. Now, for reading the data from the expenses table, we want these members to only be able to see records that belong to their user ID. Okay, so we say user's own records, and we set this to user ID, just so they can read their own data, right? That makes sense. I don't want some member to be able to see another member's expenses. When it comes to updating, same thing. Okay, for both of these 2 tables. And when it comes to deleting, so if you want them to be able to delete entries, make sure they're only able to delete their own data and not somebody else's. So even though we set global permissions to all records, okay, you can override those permissions by adding custom permissions, okay, on an individual table. Now remember, I also have a categories table, but because I set this to read all, anyone is going to be able to see these categories. from within this table. Okay? Because those are going to be available to any member. Any member should be able to see all of those categories in that lookup table. All right, let's save our permissions. And I'm just going to include myself because I already have one sample record in the directory. I'm just going to add myself as a member. Okay, because I had registered already in advance. All right, and that's it. Let's go over to our designer tab. And now let's begin building all of our app pages and all of our forms and reports, which are data parts. I will simply, under public access, rename this app page, this default name that comes with the framework. It says new app page. I'm just going to rename this to say sign up. Okay, so I rename my app page, and now I can add my elements to it. And let's begin by adding that sign up form, which links to your directory. Okay, so we add the sign up form, links to our directory as the data source. We'll include all of the fields, click next. Now let me just move my first and last name at the very top. I want those to be the first thing people fill out. So we have the first name, we'll make that field required, appearance tab. I like floating labels, as you guys know. We'll have last name, that's also going to be a required field with a floating label. And then we have the email, that's going to be a required field. We have, except the appearance needs to be floating label. It doesn't need to be floating label. Of course, you can, depending on your preference, you can have the label be on the left of the field, on top of the field, but I prefer floating labels myself. Okay. We have add confirmation field if you want to. This is up to you. If you want the user to input the same password twice, maybe for validation to make sure they don't make a mistake, you can do that. For the roles, we want them to automatically be inside this members directory. Okay, or this role, I apologize. We want it to be in the members role because that's where we set all the permissions for members that sign up. And then for groups, we haven't created any groups. We don't need that for this application. I will just remove that and click save. And just like that, we have our very simple sign up form that anybody who goes to this app page, when we publish it, will be able to sign up and eventually log in. All right, so let's always, as best practice, is to give your data parts a name. So we will call this public sign up form. I will also include maybe a heading, create an account, okay, which is going to be added here automatically. And if you want to, I also had this subheading. You can add that as a description underneath your main heading to read, sign up to start tracking your income, expenses, and savings all in one place. Lastly, if you want to, you can add a logo if you create your own by simply going into your segment. You gain access to your navigation menu, and you can also replace this default logo that comes with your Caspio framework. And you do that by clicking on select. I will just move this here, find the one that I created in advance. Let me double click, and there is my image. If you wanted to, you can also have, let me just resize this menu. It doesn't need to be that wide. You can also add other widgets inside the segment by clicking on add elements here at the top. You can add a title if you'd like. You can put that next to your logo, maybe your tagline or something like that. You can resize that. Don't worry, it doesn't have to be that big. You can always resize it. But you have the ability here really to customize the header however much you want. Just to make just to personalize it and make it look a little bit more unique to your brand and tailored to your brand. Okay, so let's remove that. We don't need that for today's demo. Hey, Early, good to see you as well. I hope you're making progress with your application. Gotcha. Yeah, enjoy the food. I mean, I wish I was doing the same thing, but I'll get my food later on. All right, good to know. Now, in order to create that sign-in link, we have the sign up, right? We click on the profile menu, and we're going to simply just, in this drop-down under directory, choose the directory we created, and that immediately, as you can see, creates this to be a sign-in link. So now anybody who signs up as a member, we have their information inside that directory. We should be able to log in with that information from within that directory because you already exist inside it. So therefore, you should be able to sign in as your email and password that you created with. And that's it. That's it for our public-facing segment. We don't need to do anything else. Now we can move on to creating all of our pages for our members when they log in. It's when they sign. Right now, if they were to sign in, we haven't created anything. Okay, so let's build them out. Let's start with the dashboard. I always like to have dashboards in my applications for KPIs and metrics and be able to see maybe a holistic view of all of our data in one place, all the important items that we're interested in seeing. Let's call this one all expenses. Then let's have a separate app page that tracks all of our recurring expenses. We obviously need to be able to add a recurring expense. So we're going to call this add recurring expense. We also want to be able to add a regular expense, something that's not recurring. Edit recurring expense. And also edit regular expense. Just going to call it edit expense like that. And let me think to see if I forgot any of my app pages. I think we got all the ones that we need. We can, oh, there's one more for reports where we're going to create a pivot table. And that's it. Now we do want to clean this up a little bit. You can see my navigation menu has way too many items. So we click on the segment, click on the navigation menu, and here we can use this little eye icon to hide a lot of these app pages. So let's go with hiding all of the ones that we're adding and editing. We can hide those. Those are going to be overlay windows, right? It's just going to be like a pop-up in the middle of your screen. So we don't need to have that be part of our main navigation menu. So I will just simply hide all the ones that allow us to add and edit. And you can see how it's a little bit more cleaner now. Like the user should be able to click on the dashboard page, view all expenses, see the recurring expenses, and also go to reports. These ones are simply going to be pop-ups that we can generate by clicking something inside the application, like a button. Okay. So that's good. I can resize this a little bit, and then let's change the logo as well. There we go. Starting to look nice. So the next thing we're going to build out is the ability to see all of the expenses, which allows us to search, see the results, and maybe we include a chart as well. So if you look at my live example, we have all expenses. Let's begin with that. We have the ability to filter, see the results, add expenses, edit, and be able to see a chart. Yeah, thanks, Airly. I'm sure you're familiar with Bridge, but now that we have Flex available as well, it's much easier to build an app. I find myself wanting to use Flex more than Bridge, and I'll tell you why. The main reason is because it's so much simpler to deploy. I don't have to worry about copying and pasting embed codes. I don't have to worry about creating web pages, finding a hosting solution. It's just all in one. Flex Framework hosts everything for you. Now, the limitation obviously is there because it's brand new. The framework is new, so it's still lacking in terms of features compared to Bridge. But we are slowly eliminating that gap between Bridge and Flex. And I think Flex will definitely surpass Bridge in many ways. The totals and aggregations that I mentioned at the beginning of the live stream will be available early next year. So the team is working tirelessly, let's just put it that way, to bring in totals and aggregation. Still in transition. Yeah, many people are trying to transition, but they're finding the lack of features to it's preventing them from making that full switch just yet. It's new, and obviously many of the Bridge applications are probably integral to their, organization, workflow, and business, and it's you have to build them in parallel, side by side. You can't just, let me delete my Bridge application and build it in Flex. It doesn't work that way. You're going to have your Bridge application, but then you're going to be building it on the side inside Flex. And then once you build it, deploy it, and publish it, you move all of your users to Flex, then you may decide to do whatever you want with the Bridge application. But we're never going to get rid of Bridge, just to be clear. Okay, we're always going to have two different products, two separate products, Bridge and Flex. Need to bridge the gap. Nice pun. I like that. All right. Heard that one before, though. I was making a joke with our team in terms of naming, how they came up with Flex. You know, because we have Bridge, right? When you think of bridge, you think like crossing the bridge, right? Why not call Flex Tunnel? You know, just to stay on brand with the naming convention. Anyway, let's digress and go back into building our application. So let's build this out. We have the first thing we're going to build is add an element, which is the search form. You can just drag and drop that here in your canvas. And we want to filter based on the expenses table. And let's filter based on name, category, and perhaps date, so we can have a date range. That's also very important. I want to be able to see all of my expenses for previous month. Okay. Hit next. So here we have our name field, appearance tab. As you know, I like floating labels. Category, we have a drop down for that. Very simple, lookup table, and just choose the table that contains all your categories. We'll set this to none. And then for date, in order to do a date range in Flex, you can do it. You just have to add another field. This is a virtual field. It's going to be underneath the actual date field. So the first date field, we're going to change the label, maybe date from. Just the label, that's it. And then the appearance will be floating label. And then the second one, let's change the label to say date to. So this is the from field. Okay, just to be clear. And this will be the to field. And then the appearance, I always like to do floating label. I always repeat myself. Save. And there's your filtering form. Okay, very simple. Let's just resize this. I know it's not going to need to be this wide. Just make it smaller and then add our heading. We'll call this filter and name our data part. Members, filter, expenses. Done. Okay, don't need to do anything else. The next thing we're going to do is add the expense report. So then when we filter, we're able to filter our data here in the middle. So I will add an element, and it doesn't have to be in the middle. Like you could stretch this out all the way if that's your preference. And then you can put the results underneath that. Okay, there's plenty of ways to customize the appearance and how you want your data to be laid out. This is just something that I'm used to. We're going to move the tabular report here in the middle. Let's place that in here based on the expenses table. And now the information we want to display is maybe the name of the expense, category, cost, and date. We'll hit next. We don't need to make any additional changes here. We just hit save. It's going to say no results found because we don't have any data inside our table. Let's rename this to say member expense results. And let's add our heading to say results. And I know I'm going to have to resize this because I do eventually want to add a chart here as well. Let's connect these two. The results will not work until you set your filters with the search form. Okay, so right now they're not connected, but if you set the filters, let's create our first filter, which is the name field. So name contains data part field, all expenses, filter expenses name, and click save. So that's our very first filter. We use contains. So it's more like a keyword search. If you type in a letter, let's say A, and you click search, it's going to show you all the results that contain that letter A. Okay? Gives you a more broader results range. Now the second one is a drop-down. So that needs to be category is equal to, because you're selecting a static value. Okay? It's not an open text field. Data part field, all expenses, filter category, done. And two more for the date field. Date is after or exactly. So this is the from. Okay, so you want to set is after or exactly. Data part field, all expenses, filter the first field, the date field. This is the from field. Okay, you hit save. And the second one will be to, but it's also based on the date field. Is before or exactly. Data part field. And you're going to choose all expenses, filter, and you set the virtual field as your second one. And that's it. That's how you do a date range when it comes to filtering inside the Flex framework. Hit save. And you'll see later on, once you start adding some expenses, then the filter will work with the results. Now let's create that chart. And I think I used a column chart. I did, based on the category and month, expenses by month, and then the series is using categories. Right. Okay. So let's build a new element, column chart. We're going to put that next to our report. Expenses table. And the fields that we're using are the cost, the category, and the date field. We might have to move these around a little bit. We'll see. First, we're going to name it members, expenses by month, and category. Okay. And then we'll add our heading, expenses by month and category. So that's going to be the heading above the chart. And then let's see, make sure this is set up correctly. So the series is going to be category, confirm. The cost is going to be, I think, on the y-axis, and then the month is going to be underneath. So the cost is the y-axis, and then I guess I removed my date. So let's bring the date back in. And then I'm going to group that by month and year. So let's click here and just simply say year and month. There we go. Save. Now, we don't see any results again because we don't have any sample data, but you will see when we publish this, once we start adding some expenses, you'll see how it all comes together, and you're going to see how the column chart works based on the data that's inside the application. All right, I think I'm good with that. However, if you wanted to, yes, so another thing that you want to do here is set your filters on the chart as well, because when you filter, yes, it's going to filter the results page because we set up our 4 filters, but it's not going to filter the chart. And if you want the chart to be filtered, you have to set those filters as well. So let me do that very quickly. Same thing as we did before. We have name, contains data part field, all expenses, filter expenses, name, 1 down, 3 more to go. Category is equal to data part field, all expenses. And this will become super easy for everyone as well once you get the hang of it. It's really not that difficult. It took me maybe 2 days or 3 days to finally get the hang of how to set up my filters. Is after or exactly, data part field, all expenses, filter date field, and the last one is the virtual field. Date field is before or exactly. All expenses, filter form, virtual field, done and done. All right. Now we're going to set up our form to add an expense. Okay, so let's go to our add expense app page, and I want this to become an overlay window, so it's more like a pop-up. And what's going to happen is when you're on this page, you're going to see a button up here, just like in my live example, to add an expense. And that's the overlay window. So that's what we're going to build. All right, so here is my add expense app page. We're going to add elements, and I need my submission form based off of the expenses table, and we need all of our fields. Click next. The user ID field, we want to hide that field. Okay, so we're going to make that hidden, and we're going to insert the auth field, user ID, and click insert. What's going to happen here is when a user logs in or a member, and they add an expense, this field is hidden, but it's automatically stamping their user ID in the expenses table. This is how you associate your expenses to your members, okay? So that eventually they only see their own data. Name is going to be a required field, appearance, floating label, category. We have a drop-down for that looks into our lookup table of categories. The only thing that I find a little bit of a nuisance to me when it comes to designing is always having to flip back and forth here to set my floating label, go back, make it. I wish kind of it was on the same page. It will make things a little bit easier, but I understand in terms of settings, it might be too cluttered to have all of that on the same page. Watch what happens here. So I go to cost, field required, appearance, floating label, and I go back. You see, I just keep going back and forth. It's a little too many clicks for my liking, but it's fine. Hopefully they figure out a way to give us the ability just to turn all fields into floating labels all at once without us having to keep going back and forth. So date field, floating label, but I still have to go back here to set my field to required if it is required. Anyway, just a minor complaint. Hit save. There's our form. Let's name it. Members. Add expense. All right, now I have a couple of buttons here, which is very helpful for your end users. Like you can save and add another and keep adding. You can save and closes the overlay window, and it goes to this page behind the scenes. Okay, and then finally, it's just a close button if you're not adding anything. So let's do the same thing here. So we have our submit button. I'm going to click on the pencil icon and simply just say, I want this to be save and add another. I will highlight and copy that really quickly. Custom label. So that's going to be my first button, save and add another. And I just want this to be a floating confirmation. So when you hit submit, it just gives you a floating confirmation that you added your item, but you can add another one. Okay, so there's save and add another. Now let's add another button that says save and close. Okay, submit, custom label, save and close. And I just want to open an app page that's behind the overlay window, and that is the all expenses app page. So what's going to happen is when you hit that button, let me save it. When you hit this button or click on it, it's going to close the overlay window and it's going to open up the page behind it. And now let's just clean the buttons up. Let's put them all side by side. We're going to click on manage and simply just save and add another will be first and save and close will be second. Hit save, and now all three buttons are on the same row. And finally, to tie all of this together, we go back to all expenses and let's click on this data part, and you will find what's called header controls. Click add. I'll just add expense. Open app page, the one that we just finished, add expense, and label can just say add expense. All right, click save. And done. All right, so it's coming together really nicely. We have now the ability to add our expense, just like in my live example. As you can see, it's going to open up that overlay window. The next thing we want is the ability to edit an expense, okay, inside the record itself. So we have edit expense. That also needs to be an overlay window, which is a pop-up. And we are going to add our update form. Let's move that inside the canvas based off of the expenses table. And I simply want to update the name, the category, the cost, and the date if needed. We're going to hit next. And you will now see my frustration a little bit with going back and forth between these two tabs. The first thing I need to do, I wish I can just flip all of these display only, which is read only, into edit. But I have to, each field at a time, I have to change the form element to text field. I know it's going to be a required field. I have to go to the appearance tab, hit the floating label, and you can see how many clicks it took just to modify one field. I know it's a minor thing, but I hope the team figures out a way to speed that up a little bit. Then we have category. Category will be a drop-down. We click on the lookup table to look into our categories lookup table. I always like to sort by none because I want the items to appear as they appear in my table. Okay. It's going to be a required field, and in the appearance tab, I set this to a floating label. Cost, text field, required field, appearance, floating label. Date, text field, required field, and floating label, and done. All right, so you see nothing here because there's nothing to edit just yet. We have no data in our tables. Let's fix this to read members, edit expense, and hit save. And I know I will need to move my update button to be next to my close button. So you click on the app page, manage, and just move the update button above the close button and hit save. All right, you don't see it because in preview mode here, there's nothing to look at because we have no sample data just yet. But note that it's completed. Now you go back to all expenses. You click on this data part again, and you will find something that's called record controls. Header controls. This controls what you see in the header of your data part. Record controls is inside the actual list of results. So you will simply just click on the add button or add link, and let's call this edit. action is going to be to open the app page, edit expense, and the label, we can just have the button for the label for the button, read edit, and click save. And again, you don't see it because there's no records found, but if you look at my live example, it's going to be this hovering button that says edit. And when you click on it, it's going to open up that edit form or update form. And we are officially done with the all expenses page. There's nothing else here to do. We can move on to the next one. So let's flip over to recurring expenses and see how we can create all of this. All right, let's go back to our designer and go to recurring expenses app page. And here we're just simply managing all the ones that are going to happen on monthly basis. Okay, that we can just set and forget. So let's go to our designer tab, click on add elements, tabular format, recurring expenses table, and the information we would like to see: name, category, cost, recurring, and date field. Click next. I don't need to make any modifications here. I'm thinking now maybe recurring wasn't the best field name for this checkbox. I am wondering if maybe status or maybe recurring status is a little bit more clear. Because what you're doing here is if it's active, it's automatically going to be going into your expenses table every month. However, if it's inactive, if you uncheck, then it's not going to be processed into your expenses table every month. You can still keep it in your report. Maybe it's Netflix, and let's say you cancel Netflix for a few months, and then you come back, you can reactivate it again, and it'll once again go into your expenses table. So that was my thinking behind this checkbox here. All right, so we have our date field, we have recurring status, cost, category, and name. We can hit save. Let's give it a name. We'll call this members recurring expenses. Click save, and then for our heading, we're going to call this maybe manage recurring expenses. I'm wondering if I called it the same thing. Yeah, I did actually call it the same thing. Manage recurring expenses. All right. Yeah, like I said, there's nothing to see here. Let's go ahead and now create our form to add a recurring expense. This is going to become an overlay window, and we are going to add another submission form based off of the recurring expenses table. And again, we need all of these fields in our submission form. We are going to hit next. User ID becomes a hidden field, and we insert the auth field, user ID. I explained this before. You have to do that in order to associate your expenses to your members. Name field, required field, appearance tab, floating label, category, drop down. Look into our lookup table for categories, none, field required, floating label. Cost, required field, floating label. Recurring. So this is the checkbox that I talked about just a moment ago. One thing that I like to do here is in the appearance tab, I will say no label, but what we can do is add display text after the checkbox. So that in itself becomes a label. And if you look at my live example, I think I called it something like make this a recurring expense. So I'm just going to copy that, come back here, and under display text, I'll paste that here. So it's going to appear after the checkbox so that your members know that, oh, okay, so if I check this box, this becomes now a recurring expense. Appearance tab, no label, all of that is good. And date is going to be a required field with the appearance floating label, and we click save. All right. So there's my form. Again, let's, as best practice, name our data parts, members, add recurring expense. And then let's, our buttons here, we're going to manage our buttons, submit. And I also think I have 3 buttons for this one as well. Yeah, I do. Save and add another. Which I think is very helpful, especially for this report because, you know, you have, let's say, Netflix, Max, Disney Plus, Hulu, and just want to add them quickly without saving and closing. So it makes sense more for this one to have save and add another. So let's do that. You can see me do that one more time. So the first submit button, I'm just going to click on the pencil icon and say save and add another. Highlight and copy. Custom label for our button. And yeah, that'll be a floating confirmation. And that's done. Let's add another button. Save and close. and submit, custom, save, and close. And we simply want to open the app page that's behind it, and that is the recurring expenses, and click that. All right, so let's go to our app page and manage our buttons, and we're gonna put this as the second one. Yeah, before the close button. Perfect. All right, I think I'm good with that. We just need to connect now. Let's go back to recurring expenses. Click on the data part, and under header controls, we want to say add recurring expense. Open app page, which is the overlay window. And I am speeding through this. I apologize if this is going over your head a little bit. You can always watch this at a later time at your own pace until you get the hang of it. We've been doing these live streams for a long time now with the Flex framework. So we go with the assumption that people have already, explored Flex and understand how things function within the framework. But if this is going a little bit too fast, trust me, it'll take you no more than a week to get the hang of this, and you'll be just as fast as I am. I promise you that. I'm way too quick. It's a unique way to spell quick, but okay, to each own. I am fast because we are limited in how much time we have for these live streams. I'm really trying to get through all the content to show you that you can build a massive, robust, sophisticated application in such a short amount of time. That is the power of no code. Okay, imagine what it would take a developer to design and create something like that. It would take a very long time. Okay, but that's the beauty of no code and sometimes low code to build these out. Like, we're actually building a SaaS solution here that you can make available as a freemium model, or you can monetize. Like, if somebody wants to use this application, anybody in the world, if they want to use that, you can give it to them as a free model, but you're going to eventually need to charge some money because they're going to put a strain on your database, your infrastructure, right? So you need to collect some money some way through ads or by charging a small monthly fee. That's something that I would do for anybody who wants to use the platform. The idea here is to maybe offer a 14-day trial or just a teaser for them to try it out. And if they like it, you might get some people to sign up. Okay, so that's the idea behind this. But it's amazing what you can do in such a short amount of time. We're almost done, and we've built this out in maybe like 35 minutes, minus all of my jibber jabber on the sidelines here that I'm doing. So 35 minutes, and we're almost done with this whole application. And you can build this out today, make it public, and do some marketing around it to get visitors to come and see the application if they want to use it. That's the beauty. All right, next thing we want is to edit our recurring expenses. So this becomes an overlay window as well. Add elements, update form, recurring expense, and we want these fields to be editable. Click next. Name, text field, required field. Appearance, floating label. Category, dropdown. Look into our category lookup table, recurring field, none, and appearance, floating label. Cost, text field, recurring field, field required, floating label, recurring, no label, but I always like to put my, where's my checkbox? Now for display text, I think I said make this a recurring expense. And then for the date field, text field, required field, and floating label, and you are officially done. No results found because we don't have any sample data, so we will just call this members edit recurring expense. Save. I know I'm going to need to modify my buttons as well, so manage, put the update button next to the close button. All of that is done. And the last thing under recurring expenses, you want to click on this data part again, and just in the record controls, click add, say edit. Action is to open an app page, which is edit recurring expense, edit, and hit save. And I think we're officially done with both of these two app pages. So we now have the ability to do recurring expenses. We can do all expenses. And what we're going to do now is just take a 2-minute break. I do need to take care of something outside really quickly, but I'm coming right back. Okay, so just give me 1 second and I will return in just a moment. Okay, give me just 1 moment. I apologize. All right, we're back. I apologize. I had to sign off on a package. So we are back. Let's continue building. So now we are actually going to do the dashboard page where we can see this month's expenses. And then we have a pie chart that gives us a breakdown by all the categories and how much money we're spending. So let's go back into our designer and let's navigate over to our dashboard app page and let's add our tabular report. You don't have to do tabular report. You can do some other ones too, like list or grid. But I will do tabular, and let's go with the expenses table. And what am I displaying here? We have name, category, cost, and date. So we have name, category, cost, and date. Don't need to do anything fancy here with the results. Let's just hit save. And because I added a chart, let's resize this to make it a little bit smaller to make room for a pie chart. We're going to call this data part members this month expenses. Okay, let's give it a heading. I called it this month's expenses. Let's copy that, come over here, because it's going to be the same thing. And then for filtering, create a filter based off of the date field. We go down here, let's see. We want current month is in the current month. There we go. Because I only want to show data for the current month. Okay, next month on the dashboard, I want to see the next month, you know. But if you want to see the previous months, you can always go to all expenses and do your date filter, right? If you need to go back and review how much money you spent on the previous month. All right, perfect. That's done. I don't think I need to do anything else to that report. Nope. Let's build our chart next. Add elements, pie chart. Move that here next to it. And we have the expenses table. The cost and category are the two fields that we need to add. Click save. Let me name it. Members. This is expenses by category. And that will be my heading. Expenses by category. All right. And for the filter. Hold on 1 second. Let me make sure my... So category value, okay, this is set up perfectly. And then for the filters, we want also to be for this month. So we're going to use the date field. And then we want is in the current month and hit save and save. So now both of these data parts are only going to show you data for the current month that you're in. Okay, because that's all I really want to be able to see on the dashboard. And that's it. Now we're going to build our report and we're finally going to be done. So let's go build this pivot table. So we go to reports, add elements. We are going to create the pivot table based off of the expenses table. There is one more thing we have to build, which is the task to automatically move recurring items into our expenses table on the right date of the month. Okay, I'll explain that once we get to the task. So the value will be cost. That's what we're trying to total. The date will be the column. I want to be able to see the months across the top. And then for the rows, I used category, but I'm curious to see if I can group based on month as well, just so, oh, I guess I can't use the date in rows and columns. All right, so we're going to use the category again for the rows. Let's hit next. Let's see, for the date field, I want this to be month and year. That's what I'm doing my data grouping on. I'm good with everything else. Let's hit save. It's going to say no results found. Now for my data part, let's call this a members pivot table. I don't know, let's call it expenses by month and category. I guess I'm running out of room here. So how about just expenses by month and category? All right, that's good. And we're going to call this heading expenses by month and category for my main heading above the data part. And I think we're officially done with all of the forms and reports. We've created everything. Now we just need to set up our automatic task that's going to run daily to check if the recurring expense is checked, and every month on that specific day of the month, as long as it, like, let's say you added this recurring expense to start on the 5th of every month. So that's number 5, right? And let's say you started in June 5th. Now what we're going to check against, if July 5th, if next month 5 equals to 5, again, I want to move that item into the expenses table. So there are 2 conditions here that we're looking at. One is that it's recurring. That's the checkbox. And the second condition is that the day of the month is equal to the following month. So as long as 5 equals 5 for July, August, September, October, it's always going to move that expense, that recurring expense, into your expenses table. Okay. So let's set up our task. Hopefully it's not going to be too complicated of a task to set up here. But we want to run this task. Let's configure this to run daily. Okay, and we're going to run this at midnight. And what we want is to insert into the expenses table from, so let's select from the recurring expenses table. And we're going to have 2 conditions created here. So I need to have, I believe it's under logic. Yeah, and. So this is going to be a little bit, I wouldn't say tricky to set up, but what we want the first one is to be whether recurring equals to true, meaning yes. That's how you, in the triggered action, or in this Blockly framework, that's how you set your checkbox to be yes if it's true. Okay, so if that recurring checkbox is true, and let me find my, there's a logic, yeah, and all right, so the and is going to be, let me think for a second, it should be where the date, get the day of the actual date. All right, so what we want is to yeah, it's this one here. So we want to get the date. So I need my field date to get the day. All right, let me explain. So if your starting day is, let's say, what month are we? We are in November right now, right? November? Yeah, November. So if your starting day for the recurring expense is on the 14th, you want to get that day, 14. That's what we're looking at. From that starting date, all we care about is the actual day of the month, which is number 14. That's when we start the recurring expense. And we want that to equal to the today's date. So if today is the 14th, basically. So we want another one of these, I believe. We're going to test this out later on, but we want that is equal to the timestamp, which is today's date, and we want to get the day as well. So hopefully this is making sense. Whatever your recurring starting date is, let's say November 14th, you get the day. And if the following month, let's say December now, is also 14, that's the condition that we're looking at. Only then copy this recurring expense into the expenses table. Hopefully that's clear now. And then you're simply just going to decide what fields you want to copy over. So user ID, you want the date field to equal to user ID because we're copying that information over. Then you can right click and just select duplicate. The name, right click, duplicate. Category is much easier to do. Cost. Oops. Cost is going to be cost. And then the final one here for date, I believe should be actually the timestamp because you want to copy over day's date into the expenses table when that recurring expense was processed. So you're simply just copying the today's date into your expenses table. All right, and this is our actual task. Now we can test the whole application. Let's save. Let's give it a name. Copy recurring expense to expenses table. I'm always bad with my naming convention, but that's clear to me. Oh, I already used the same exact name. What are the odds? You can't have the same task name in multiple different applications. So I will just, add another here, E at the end, and we'll come back and fix that later on if needed. All right, so now my task is running daily at midnight. Let's go ahead and test out this whole entire application now. We go to deployment to publish everything. So we will just expand each segment. There's only one app page in the public segment. You can just toggle that on very quickly. And then for your members, you can do a bulk deployment. So deploy all of these at once. You don't have to do them one at a time. And now we can go ahead and log in. I will just, because I used the same directory in the demo that I showed you at the beginning of the live stream and the one that we built today. So let me log out from this directory. And we'll close both of these two tabs. And now, as long as anyone has access to this link, they will be able to create the account. They will be able to sign in. I already have myself inside the directory, so let's go ahead and log in. Test 1, 2, 3, exclamation. Close. And we should see, hold on a second, dashboard. Hang on one second. Is it redirecting me to my demo application? Because it should be, this is a brand new application that doesn't have, I think I need to, let me try that again. Let me log out. It should be a different URL unless I'm doing something incorrectly here. So this dashboard page. Let me try to log in one more time. Maybe, oops, maybe it remembered my old session. Like I know if I was using a different browser, I wouldn't have this issue, but test 1, 2, 3, exclamation. Close. Yeah, okay, there we are. So I think it was remembering my previous session, but we should be good now. You can see we have no data inside this application. This is the first thing that the member will see when they log in. They go to all expenses. They see nothing. We go to recurring expenses. We see nothing. Reports, and there's nothing to see because we haven't added any data yet. So let me begin by adding a recurring expense here. How about Netflix? Category, we have our drop down for entertainment. Cost maybe $24.99. Make this a recurring expense. And let's begin. Okay, so I want to make sure, yeah, we want to start the next day because at midnight tonight, it's going to process this and move it into our all expenses. So let's save and add another. Let's have one more. How about the Carnival car payment? Well, loan payment, whatever you want to call this. So this will be bills maybe. Bills and utilities. Or maybe, do I have something else? Auto and transport. Let's just go with bills and utilities. Cost, I don't know, $650 a month. Make this a recurring expense. Date also. Let's also have internet, just so we can have a variety of different categories. Shopping, this will be bills and utilities. Cost $79.99. Make this recurring. Also start tomorrow. Save and then another. Okay, let's close. So now we have 3 recurring items. So they're not in our expenses report yet because it has to run at midnight in order for that to be processed inside this table. In my dashboard, Yeah, it doesn't show anything yet because again, it hasn't been processed. These are the recurring expenses, but because it begins on the 13th, which is tomorrow, I think I put, what did I say? The starting date is the 13th. Yeah. So that's why we don't see it yet, because the first initial payment will be made on the 13th. So we don't see it. However, let's go into our account here really quickly and run this task manually. Even though it's going to happen at midnight tonight, I'm just going to run it so that we can have some data in our expenses table. So let's run it behind the scenes. You wouldn't do that, okay, because you're going to let the task do it for you automatically. But now we can go to all expenses. And of course, it's not showing up for some reason. I ran it. I should have copied it over to my expenses table, and it didn't. Oh, that's not good. All right, so now I need to figure out why it did not. Maybe it's still running. Maybe we give it a little bit more time. Well, we can check really quickly. Let's go to our expenses table and see if it moved it over. It has not moved it over yet, so maybe there's something wrong with my task. Run task at midnight. Insert into the expenses table. Select from the recurring expenses. All of that is right. Where recurring equals to true. So that's right. And the date equals to date. Maybe it's not running it because the day doesn't equal to day. That's what it is. So what we're going to do then, let's go into our recurring expense and just change it to today's date. So today is the 12th, right? So let's change this to 12 so that it knows that day equals to 12 equals to 12, today's date versus the starting date. Now we're going to run this task manually. So let's run it now. And then hopefully we should now see that data here. All right, there we go. So we can go to our dashboard. These are the expenses that happen to. Just know this will run automatically at midnight because 12 equals to 12. Okay, but I don't want to wait until midnight, so I had to run it manually in order for us to see the data in our application. So by category, you can see bills and utilities, $729. That's what we're spending for the current month. We can see that is bills and utilities here. These two items. We have our Netflix. Now, I wish we had totals in aggregation because we could be able to see a grand total here at the bottom, all of these items added together. But Flex doesn't have that yet. It's available in Bridge. Okay. All expenses, we should be able to filter as well. So this is also by category for the month of November. Okay. If you filter, let's just say for the previous month, October. Oh, I forgot to include my calendar pop up here in my filter. Okay, but let's just do this manually like that. All right, so if you do something like that, it should say no results found because we don't have any data for the month of October. You can reset the filter and it's going to bring back all the ones for November. Recurring expenses. Now what you could do is, let's say you cancel your Netflix account. You could also create a delete button here, but let's say you say, okay, I no longer want this to be a recurring item, but I know I will resubscribe at a later date. You hit update. Okay, let me close that. You will now see no, or in other words, inactive. So now for December 12th, following month, Netflix will not be processed and it will not be moved in your expenses table. Okay, just keep that in mind. That's how it works. Make this a recurring item so we can fix it. And then we have our reports, which we have our pivot table, and this will just show you group based on category for bills and utilities and entertainment for the month of November. And as additional months come in, you will see December, January 2026, February, March, and so on and so forth. Okay. And that's it. That's how you build a SaaS application using the Flex framework. We built all of that, minus me talking about other things that are not related to the app, in less than 1 hour. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Like right now, if you follow my video to a T, you could build this out very quickly yourself. And like I said, if you do some marketing around it, you can monetize. Caspio has 2 payment, well, not with Flex, but you can do it with Bridge. If you go to payment processors, I would recommend if you want to use the Flex framework, there are ways around it to collect payment. that's not integrated within the actual application itself. Like you can have a link that says, "Oh, here's my Stripe account. If you want to continue using the application, you have to continue paying us the monthly fee." Let's say you think this is worth like $10 a month for somebody to use. And if they want to cancel, they have a cancellation link as well. So go here to cancel, or go here to subscribe if you want to use this application. Okay? If let's say you offer this as a trial account, okay, let's say a 30-day trial account for you to test out the application, but they continue using it without paying you. If you want to suspend their account, you could. You just simply go to directories. You find that directory, and I apologize, I have a lot of demos in my applications. Normally, you wouldn't see this many directories. So if you go here and you open this one, you will find me. This is the only member that's signed up. Now what you can do is you go to Open, Action, and you can suspend the account until they pay you. And once they pay you again, you can reactivate their account. And there's a lot of cool things with directories, especially in terms of security. You can enable two-factor authentication to make it even more secure. But yeah, that's the idea, using the Flex framework to build out this application that we created today, which is My Finances, Caspio Live Build. So we have our Designer tab where you build all of your forms and reports. We have our 4 simple tables for this application. We have our roles. We have a single task that does all of this for us automatically when it comes to recurring payments. All right. So thank you so much for your attendance. I appreciate your time as always. Like I always say, without the attendance, there would be no live stream. So thank you again for coming in and watching the live streams. I do appreciate that very much. Don't forget to like the video as well so that we can get some more exposure. But hopefully you find a way to build your own application. Whether it's a SaaS application where you incentivize and allow people to register, log in, and do something, or you build a completely internal application. You don't make it available to the public, so it's for your organization, your department, where you want to manage projects, maybe a CRM, some other type of application, depending on what you're tracking in terms of data. Very cool use case. Hopefully I can build this and save some money for more Lego. First of all, it's Lego. It's not Legos, just to correct you. Lego is plural. All right. Minor little thing. I'm sure you're aware. But anyway, yeah, build something out. See if you can leverage the platform to make some money for yourself. I mean, that's always, if you have the entrepreneurial mindset, go for it. I don't see why not. There's always somebody willing to pay for something that they need. Okay. The hardest part is marketing. Okay. You can have the best application in the world that no one has ever seen. But if people don't hear about you or know about your application, it's futile. It's useless. All right. All right. Thank you so much for your time. I'm not going to drag this on any longer. So I will keep the comments section running for another minute. And I'll see you in 2 weeks' time. All right. Take care. All right. Have a good rest of the week. Bye-bye.